Welcome to the series Night 5 to fall asleep fast. A place where you don't need to do anything at all except listen and let your thoughts slowly settle. Before you drift off, you can gently like this video and, if you wish, leave a quiet comment sharing where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Tonight, we gently explore how ancient mariners navigated the world's wildest seas before GPS. A quiet story from history told at a calm, unhurried pace, with no rush and nowhere you need to be. If you listened to the previous night, welcome back. And if this is your first night, you can begin right here, exactly as you are. A new night will be waiting for you again tomorrow. But for now, allow yourself to rest, breathe softly, and let this story slowly carry you into sleep. Long before numbers were assigned to the earth, before lines were drawn across maps and directions were reduced to symbols, the world existed without coordinates. The sea, in particular, was not something that could be measured or neatly divided. It stretched outward in every direction, vast and breathing, its surface changing with light, wind, and time. To those who stood at its edge thousands of years ago, it did not appear as a pathway, but as a living presence, quiet at times, restless at others, and always unknowable. In this world, ancient mariners prepared to leave shore without the comfort of certainty. There were no glowing screens, no instruments humming softly with calculations, no voices offering turn-by-turn guidance. What existed instead was a deep familiarity with uncertainty. The sea was not conquered. It was entered carefully, with respect, and often with hesitation. Each departure was an act of trust in forces that could not be controlled. The shoreline itself marked the boundary between the known and the unknown. Villages and settlements ended where solid ground met moving water. Beyond that line, the world dissolved into motion. The color of the sea shifted with the sky, sometimes deep blue, sometimes gray, sometimes reflecting the pale silver of the moon. There were no signs pointing outward, no markers to indicate how far one had traveled. Distance was felt rather than counted. Boats in this age were shaped by hands that understood wood and water intimately. Their forms were simple, curved, and balanced, designed not for speed, but for survival. When they drifted away from land, the familiar sounds of life behind them slowly faded. What remained was the rhythmic movement of water against the hull, a sound steady enough to soothe, yet persistent enough to remind travelers of where they were. Time itself behaved differently at sea. Without clocks or schedules, the passing of hours blended into the rise and fall of light. Day unfolded gently into evening, and night arrived without urgency. Darkness did not bring immediate fear, but did bring silence. Under the open sky, the world seemed larger, and the mariners smaller, carried forward by currents they could not see. In the absence of coordinates, direction was not a concept fixed to numbers. It was something sensed through repetition. Sailors learned the feeling of traveling east or west not by measurement, but by memory. They remembered how the air felt on their skin, how the sun rose or set relative to the boat, how long shadows stretched across the deck at certain moments. Over time, these sensations formed a quiet internal map. The sea offered no straight lines. Routes curved and shifted, responding to winds and seasons. Ancient mariners did not expect consistency. They expected variation. This acceptance shaped how they moved. Instead of forcing a path, they followed what was given. When conditions changed, they adapted. When progress slowed, they waited. There was also an understanding that the sea did not belong to anyone. It was shared by all who dared to cross it, and by countless creatures beneath its surface. Fish moved in patterns unseen. Birds traced invisible arcs above the waves, and the water itself carried histories older than memory. To travel across it required humility. Without coordinates, mistakes were inevitable. Some journeys ended sooner than intended, others lasted longer. There were moments when land disappeared completely, when the horizon became a perfect circle of water and sky. In those moments, mariners relied not on panic, but on routine. They adjusted sails, observed the movement of clouds, and allowed the boat to continue its gentle forward motion. Night, especially, transformed the sea. With the sun gone, visual landmarks vanished. The water darkened, reflecting only faint light. Yet night was not empty. It revealed patterns that daylight concealed. The sky opened, and stars emerged one by one, steady and unblinking. These lights did not rush or flicker. They remained. At first, the stars were simply beautiful. Over time, they became familiar. Mariners noticed how certain stars always appeared in the same part of the sky, how others moved slowly across it. They did not yet name this knowledge as navigation, but it planted the earliest seeds. In a world without coordinates, the sky began to offer something close to orientation. Still, the early stages of this understanding were quiet and incomplete. There was no certainty yet, only observation. Each journey added to a growing awareness that the world, though vast, was not entirely random. Patterns existed, even if they revealed themselves slowly. As boats continued to leave shore generation after generation, the absence of coordinates became less of a limitation and more of a condition to live within. Mariners learned to let go of the need for precision. Instead, they cultivated patience, attention, and trust in gradual knowledge. The sea did not provide answers quickly. It required listening. And in the stillness of long nights, with nothing but water below and stars above, listening became possible. It was in these moments, when the world seemed reduced to motion and light, that ancient mariners first began to understand that direction could exist without numbers. That guidance could come not from lines drawn on parchment, but from the quiet consistency of the natural world. As the boat continued forward through the darkness, the sky overhead grew clearer. The stars, once merely distant lights, began to take on meaning, and slowly, almost without noticing, the journey moved from uncertainty toward awareness, guided not by coordinates, but by the heavens themselves. When the shoreline had long since disappeared and the sea surrounded the vessel on every side, the sky began to take on a new importance. What had once been merely a backdrop to daily life slowly became a source of quiet guidance. Above the moving water, the night revealed a depth and structure that the land often concealed. In the stillness of open sea, ancient mariners found themselves looking upward more often, not out of fear, but out of attention. The night sky did not change quickly. It unfolded gradually, star by star, as darkness settled. First came the brightest points of light, steady and clear, appearing in familiar positions. Over time, smaller stars followed, filling the space between until the sky felt woven together by light. For those drifting across the sea, this consistency offered a rare sense of stability in an otherwise shifting world. Long before these lights were named or charted, they were noticed. Mariners observed that certain stars always returned to the same place, night after night. Even as the boat moved forward, these stars seemed fixed, indifferent to the journey below. Others, however, traced slow arcs across the sky, rising and setting in predictable rhythms. The contrast between movement and stillness quietly taught lessons without words. There were no written instructions for reading the sky. Knowledge grew slowly, carried across generations through repetition and careful observation. A sailor learned not by memorizing constellations, but by spending countless nights beneath them. The process was gradual, almost meditative. Over time, patterns emerged, not as sharp outlines, but as familiar shapes felt rather than defined. The sky offered direction in a way the sea could not. While water reflected light and motion endlessly, the stars remained separate from the chaos below. By noting where certain stars rose or lingered, mariners began to associate them with broad directions. This understanding was never precise, but it did not need to be. It was enough to know that following a particular star would keep the vessel moving steadily rather than drifting aimlessly. Clouds occasionally obscured the sky, and when they did, the sense of guidance faded. In those moments, mariners relied on memory. They recalled the last visible positions of the stars, the angle of the boat, the direction of the wind. Even without sight, the sky remained present in the mind, its order remembered rather than seen. The moon played a quieter role. Its phases marked time more than direction, but its presence softened the darkness. Moonlight stretched across the water, creating a path of silver that moved with the waves. Though it could not guide the boat in a fixed way, it offered reassurance. illuminating the familiar curve of the horizon and the gentle rise and fall of the sea. As nights passed, the connection between sky and sea deepened. Mariners began to notice how the stars shifted slightly with the seasons, how certain patterns appeared only at specific times of year. These changes were subtle, unfolding so slowly they were easy to miss. Yet over many journeys, they became part of a larger understanding. That time itself could be read in the sky. This awareness did not remove uncertainty, but it softened it. Knowing that the sky followed its own quiet order allowed mariners to trust that the world was not entirely unpredictable. Even when waves rose or winds shifted, the stars continued their slow, steady movement. In their constancy, there was comfort. The act of watching the sky required patience. There was nothing immediate or urgent about it. One did not glance upward and receive instant answers. Instead, guidance came through long familiarity. The more time spent beneath the stars, the more their presence became reassuring rather than distant. On particularly calm nights, when the sea mirrored the sky, the boundary between above and below seemed to dissolve. Stars reflected in the water, creating the illusion of light both overhead and beneath the hull. In these moments, the boat appeared suspended between two vast spaces, moving gently through a world defined by reflection and rhythm. Navigation by the sky was never about control. It was about alignment. Mariners adjusted their course not to force a destination, but to remain in harmony with the patterns they observed. If a star drifted from its expected position, the vessel was gently corrected. These adjustments were small, almost unnoticeable, yet over time they shaped the entire journey. The sky also taught restraint. When stars vanished behind clouds or storms, mariners learned to wait. They did not rush forward blindly. Instead, they allowed the boat to move slowly, trusting that clarity would return. This patience was as important as any observation. It preserved both direction and calm. Over generations, this relationship with the night sky became deeply ingrained. Children grew up hearing stories of journeys guided by stars, though the stories focused less on destinations and more on the experience of travel itself. The sky was not a tool to be mastered, but a companion to be respected. As vessels continued across open water, the knowledge carried within them expanded. Each journey added subtle refinements. Mariners became more sensitive to slight changes in the sky, more aware of how the angle of a star related to the movement of the boat. Yet this growing skill remained quiet, almost invisible. There were no declarations of expertise, only continued practice. Eventually, the stars became more than lights in the darkness. They formed a silent map, one that existed not on parchment, but in memory and instinct. This map could not be shared easily with those who had not traveled beneath the open sky. It required experience, stillness, and time. As the night deepened and the boat continued forward, the sky remained clear. Stars traced their slow paths, indifferent to the journey below. And beneath them, ancient mariners moved steadily onward, guided not by certainty, but by familiarity with the quiet order above. Yet even the stars could not answer every question. When the sky was hidden and the sea restless, other signs would become necessary. And so, gradually, attention shifted downward, from the heavens back to the water itself, where another form of guidance awaited. As the mariners continued to move across the vast expanse of water, another sense began to awaken, one quieter and subtler than sight. The sea spoke in a language that could not be read with eyes, but only felt with patience and attentiveness. Every wave had a rhythm, every current a subtle pull, and every shift of water whispered information to those willing to listen. The gentle lapping of small waves against the wooden hull became a soft percussion, a heartbeat of the ocean itself. It was a sound that required focus, not to analyze or question, but to internalize. Over time, the sailors learned to distinguish one rhythm from another. The steady flow of a gentle current, the slight swell of a distant tide, the deeper, resonant roll of a coming storm. Each note was subtle, layered upon the next, forming a quiet symphony that guided movement without a word being spoken. Currents, in particular, became teachers of patience and subtlety. The boat responded to their pull, drifting slightly east or west, north or south, without any visual indication of change. A careful observer could feel the difference in resistance against the hull, sense the tiny tilt of the vessel, and adjust sails and rudder ever so slightly. These were not commands issued by instruments or calculations, but intuitions honed through hours of quiet observation and bodily memory. The color of the water, too, spoke to those attuned to it. Under the sun, differences could be noted, darker patches suggesting depth, lighter areas indicating shallows or the presence of sandbanks far below. But even at night, when moonlight or starlight was the only illumination, subtle variations in hue could be detected, hinting at the movements of currents and the presence of distant shoals. The attentive mariner learned to let the senses of touch, sight, and sound merge into one continuous awareness of place and motion. This listening was not passive. It required active stillness, a slowing of thought to match the pace of the ocean itself. It was not about controlling the water, but about aligning oneself with its patterns. Every night, the quiet rhythms of water against would become a lesson in humility. The sea was vast, and the boat's power was small. Success did not come from force, but from harmony. Over generations, this knowledge became refined into a quiet expertise, a kind of instinct. Mariners could sense approaching weather long before clouds gathered in the sky. They could detect shifts in tides that hinted at unseen land or obstacles. Every sound, every movement, every subtle reflection on the water's surface contributed to an internal map of possibilities, built not of lines and numbers, but of sensation and memory. The ocean also taught patience. There were stretches of days when the wind slackened, and the boat drifted slowly with the current. In these periods, progress was measured not in distance, but in the continuation of movement itself. Sailors learned to find calm in this waiting, to read the subtlest cues of water, knowing that sudden shifts could occur without warning. This patience became part of their very being, shaping not only the journey, but the character of those who undertook it. In moments when the sea was especially quiet, mariners could hear its smaller movements, the splash of a fish breaking the surface, the gentle scrape of water along a submerged rock, the faint bubbling of underwater springs or unseen eddies. These small, almost imperceptible sounds, when interpreted correctly, could indicate proximity to land or obstacles, or simply reveal the deeper currents at work below the surface. The ocean was alive, and every sound was a message. Even the air above the water carried hints. The way it shifted with temperature, the slight difference in moisture, the smell of brine and distance, all contributed to the understanding of the environment. Mariners learned that sound and scent were as much tools of navigation as sight or memory. To travel across open waters required a fusion of all senses, each enhancing the other, each contributing to a whole picture that could not be captured by measurement alone. At night, when the stars guided from above, the ocean's sounds offered grounding from below. The repetition of waves, the gentle rocking of the hull, the whisper of wind through rigging, all combined into a steady rhythm that encouraged sleep even as the mind absorbed subtle lessons. Listening to the ocean became a practice of meditation and awareness, a dual act of navigation and rest. With time, sailors learned to differentiate between similar rhythms. A certain wave pattern might indicate the approach of a large current. A faint difference in pitch could signal an eddy forming nearby. These distinctions were never obvious, but in the quiet, patient observation, they became clear. In this way, the ocean itself became both teacher and companion, offering guidance without demand, presence without pressure. This method of navigation, relying on the senses and prolonged observation, did not offer the immediacy of instruments or charts, but it fostered a profound intimacy with the natural world. Those who moved with the water, rather than against it, discovered a flow that carried not just the boat, but the mind itself, easing it toward calm and focus. The journey was measured in subtle shifts, in quiet patterns, in the patience of the body and attention of the mind. And so, in these hours at sea, with nothing to see but moving water and a sky full of stars, the mariners learned to listen, to hear the currents, the tides, and the subtle conversations of water and wind. Every movement of the boat was a response, not a command, a gentle negotiation with the living sea. And in this careful listening, the ocean revealed paths across its vastness, teaching that guidance could come not from tools or numbers, but from the attentive, patient mind. The boat continued forward, ever attentive to the quiet instructions of the water. Every night, every journey, reinforced these lessons. Listening to the ocean was not a task, but a way of being. The knowledge gained was subtle, intimate, and enduring, forming the foundation for the next layer of navigation. The language of the wind itself, which would soon guide the vessel in complementary ways, adding nuance to the growing understanding of the world beyond sight. Beyond the patterns of the sea and the constancy of the night sky, another guide revealed itself, the wind. Unlike the solid presence of land or the fixed patterns of stars, wind was invisible, a moving force felt more than seen. It brushed across the skin, whispered through rigging, and carried sense and sound from afar. To the attentive mariner, the wind was more than a weather phenomenon. It was a language, speaking in gentle gusts and shifting currents, instructing the vessel and shaping the journey in ways that instruments could never replicate. The wind was capricious, varying not only from day to day, but from hour to hour. A calm that lasted for hours could be replaced suddenly by a breath that rippled the sails. Each variation carried meaning. A soft northern breeze might promise steady progress, while a sudden shift from the west demanded adjustment, careful attention, and the subtle art of anticipation. Those who learned to listen to the wind found that it offered both warning and guidance, an intimate companion whose instructions required patience and humility. Mariners approached wind as a teacher. They felt its strength against their hands and faces, noticed its interaction with sails and masts, and watched the way it bent the rigging or stirred the sea surface. The wind's voice was rarely loud. It was quiet, insistent, and continuous, requiring the mind to slow, to observe without rushing. By aligning the boat with these subtle cues, sailors could harness its energy, moving efficiently without forcing their will against the natural flow. The direction and consistency of wind defined the possible paths. Mariners memorized the behaviors of seasonal winds, recognizing that certain currents and weather patterns repeated over months and years. These patterns were not mechanical or predictable in the modern sense, but familiar enough that careful observation provided assurance. The mariner's knowledge was a tapestry of sensation, experience, and timing, woven from countless nights spent reading the gentle language of moving air. The wind also communicated warnings. A sudden increase in speed, a shift in tone, the smell carried from distant lands, all could signal a storm approaching, a change in direction, or the nearness of obstacles hidden beneath the waves. To respond appropriately, sailors had to trust their senses fully, interpreting hints that might seem imperceptible to anyone else. This skill was not innate, but honed through patient immersion, observation, and repetition. In combination with the sky and the sea, the wind completed a triad of guidance, where the stars offered steady orientation, and the currents provided subtle movement cues. The wind supplied energy and momentum. Together, these elements formed a symphony of navigation, each element complementing the others. The mariner became a conductor, attentive and responsive, translating the invisible language of nature into motion. There was also an artistry to moving with the wind, adjusting the sails, angling the rudder, tilting the hull. Each movement required balance, timing, and subtle judgment. Too aggressive, and the boat could falter. Too passive, and it could drift inefficiently. The skill lay in listening first, then responding, letting the vessel move as an extension of natural forces rather than as an object imposed upon by force. Night brought particular subtleties. The cool air carried differently across the deck, sometimes chilling, sometimes gentle. Winds were often lighter at night, but their direction could still be sensed. The quiet of the surrounding sea allowed subtle shifts to be noticed. The brush of air on skin, the sway of rigging, the slight resonance against wood. Each of these elements contributed to a continuous conversation between boat and environment. Over time, this conversation became internalized. Sailors no longer needed to consciously monitor every aspect. Intuition emerged from repeated observation. They felt the wind as part of their own awareness, an extension of their senses and understanding. This attunement allowed for smoother travel, fewer errors, and a deeper connection with the world. The wind was not merely a force to be harnessed. It was a partner, subtle and guiding. The wind also taught resilience. Change was inevitable. No journey could progress without adaptation. A shift could arrive suddenly, and those unprepared would falter. But those attuned to its patterns learned patience, observation, and gentle adjustment. The vessel moved with the wind, not against it, and the mind mirrored this approach, finding calm and acceptance of natural rhythm. Even in moments of uncertainty, when clouds obscured stars or currents shifted unexpectedly, the wind remained a constant companion. Its presence could not be ignored, and its messages, if attentively received, offered reassurance. By the end of long nights, the mariners understood that the wind's subtle language complemented the sky above and the sea below, forming a quiet framework of understanding across the open waters. In this way, the wind became both teacher and companion, guiding the mariners along unseen paths, carrying the vessel forward with gentle insistence, and reminding all who traveled that knowledge could be sensed, felt, and interpreted beyond the confines of measurement or instrument. It was an art of listening, of patience, and of continuous attention, a calm, ongoing dialogue between human and nature that unfolded with each passing hour. The relationship with the wind deepened over time. Each journey revealed new nuances. Differences in direction, force, and rhythm were cataloged in memory, forming a mental library of experience. Even without words or charts, this knowledge allowed mariners to navigate with surprising accuracy, guided by observation, intuition, and the continuous whispers of air across wood and sail. And as the boat continued its journey under the night sky, with the ocean beneath and stars above, the mariners' awareness of wind connected them to the broader environment. The language of the wind, once mysterious and capricious, had become familiar, a guide as reliable as the currents and as steady as the stars. Listening, adjusting, and moving in harmony with this invisible force, the sailors found not only direction but serenity, a calm alignment with the world in motion. Beyond the guidance of stars, currents, and wind, mariners often faced a world that seemed unpredictable, a realm defined by uncertainty. Even with the night sky clear and wind steady, there were moments when nothing offered a clear answer. Mist might descend, obscuring both horizon and sky. Currents might shift unexpectedly, or a gentle swell could become a rolling obstacle. It was in these moments that the sailors learned a different kind of navigation, not through sight or sound alone, but through patience, observation, and a steady mind. The uncertainty of the open sea was more than a physical challenge. It was a mental one. To sail forward without precise coordinates required the cultivation of calm, a surrender to circumstances, and trust in one's own experience. The mariner's mind became a map in itself, cataloging subtle changes, sensing patterns, and remaining alert to the smallest hints in water, wind, and air. In these moments, each decision was measured, deliberate, yet gentle, taken with the understanding that the ocean would move at its own pace. Mornings brought light that could illuminate obstacles, but nights were filled with ambiguity. Shadows stretched differently over rolling waves, and the horizon could appear distant or vanish entirely into the fog. Sailors learned to treat these conditions with respect rather than anxiety, moving slowly, adjusting as subtly as the water allowed, and relying on the accumulated knowledge of previous nights, previous journeys, and previous generations. Every ripple and whisper of the ocean carried information, and the patient observer could decode it through repetition and attention. Mist, in particular, taught both caution and trust. It obscured the horizon, making landmarks invisible, and transformed familiar constellations into hidden guides. Within the haze, sailors were forced to rely on the rhythms of the boat, the sensations of movement through water, and the faint sounds of the surrounding sea. Each decision became an exercise in balance, aligning the vessel's motion with invisible currents and unseen winds. This careful attention developed both skill and a meditative calm, a state of awareness that was quiet yet alert. Even in uncertainty, the mariners found continuity. They relied on the principles learned from observing stars, listening to the ocean, and feeling the wind. These elements provided a framework, a foundation upon which to navigate the unknown. The absence of certainty did not invite panic. It encouraged subtlety, patience, and attentiveness. The voyage became an interplay of known patterns and unpredictable shifts, a dance in which both the boat and the mariner adjusted continuously. Long stretches of stillness also offered a unique kind of clarity. When the wind slowed and waves softened, the world seemed suspended. Time was measured not by distance traveled, but by careful observation, the gentle breathing of the boat, and the nuanced changes in the surrounding environment. These moments of calm, paradoxically, brought a deeper understanding than any period of rapid progress. Uncertainty required the sailor to slow, to pay attention, and to trust in the rhythm of the natural world. Throughout these voyages, the mariners developed resilience. Challenges were not simply obstacles, but opportunities to refine skill and awareness. Each unexpected shift in wind or current became a lesson in adaptation. Mist, storms, and changing tides were no longer frightening unknowns, but components of the environment to be interpreted and responded to thoughtfully. The journey was a practice in harmony, aligning human movement with natural forces rather than attempting to dominate them. The knowledge of how to act in uncertainty was shared among sailors through observation and example. Younger mariners watched the reactions of experienced travelers when conditions became unpredictable. They learned that a steady hand, patient mind, and careful adjustments often resulted in smooth navigation, even when nothing seemed certain. Experience taught that rushing or forcing decisions could lead to misalignment, whereas subtlety and attentiveness maintained balance. In addition to patience, uncertainty cultivated creativity. Mariners experimented with sail angles, rudder adjustments, and positioning, observing the outcomes and refining techniques over time. Even small insights, accumulated night after night, contributed to a broader understanding of how to move effectively in unpredictable conditions. The ocean's lessons were embedded in repeated practice, a slow and immersive education that fostered both skill and serenity. The mental discipline developed in these uncertain hours was essential. Mariners learned to maintain focus without tension, to notice subtle shifts without anxiety, and to interpret faint signals from water, wind, and sky without forcing conclusions. This calm attentiveness became a kind of meditative state, allowing the mind to process information steadily and continuously, a practice that not only aided navigation but nurtured inner peace. Ultimately, sailing through uncertainty revealed a profound truth. Control was limited, yet mastery was possible through awareness and adaptation. The mariner's role was not to command the ocean, but to move with it, listening, observing, and responding in a continuous dialogue. The journey through unknown waters became a meditation, a careful unfolding in which each small decision, each attentive adjustment, and each silent observation contributed to steady progress. By night's end, even the most ambiguous conditions offer clarity. The rhythms of the boat, the voice of the wind, the patterns of the waves, and the distant constellations provided a web of guidance that could be interpreted in countless ways. Uncertainty was no longer a source of fear, but an invitation to mindfulness, a teacher that instructed in the subtle art of movement, patience, and trust. Through this delicate balance, the mariners learned that knowledge could be as much felt and experienced as it could be seen or recorded. With each crossing, the experience of uncertainty became a tool, a skill honed through time and reflection. It was understood that no journey would ever be entirely predictable, and that the ability to navigate without complete information was itself a measure of mastery. Sailing through uncertainty was not a problem to be solved, but a state of being, an ongoing practice of quiet awareness, patience, and attentive engagement with the natural world. Long before maps and instruments could be relied upon, the knowledge of navigation was carried in voices. It was spoken, repeated, and memorized. Each journey across the vast, open sea was an opportunity to reinforce and transmit this wisdom. Elders, experienced in both the sky above and the waters below, would share their insights with those who would follow, and in this quiet transfer, generations of sailors gained an intimate understanding of movement and direction that no paper chart could ever convey. The act of passing knowledge was deliberate and rhythmic, almost ritualistic. Stories of particular stars, recurring currents, and familiar wind patterns were told in ways that embedded them deeply into memory. The stories themselves were calm and unhurried, allowing listeners to absorb the cadence, the subtle connections between phenomena, and the nuanced instructions encoded within each tale. Listening became an exercise in attention, patience, and trust. Trust in both the teacher and the lessons of nature. Memory, in this context, was as vital as skill. A sailor who could recall the position of a constellation in a certain season, or the way a current shifted under particular winds, could navigate with precision despite the absence of instruments. These recollections were not abstract. They were tied to sensory experience, to movement, to the feeling of the boat rocking under gentle waves, and to the soft whisper of the wind through rigging. Each story was anchored in lived observation. The transmission of knowledge also fostered a sense of continuity. Even when storms obscured the stars or currents became unpredictable, the teachings carried in voice guided the sailors. Experienced voices offered reassurance, conveying methods to detect subtleties, interpret faint signs, and remain calm in the face of uncertainty. The spoken word was an instrument of both education and meditation, shaping not only understanding, but the mental resilience of those who listened. In these sessions, repetition played a crucial role. Stories were recounted, not once, but multiple times, often over the span of weeks or months. Each repetition allowed details to settle more deeply, to become part of the sailor's instinctive knowledge. A direction, a movement, a sequence of adjustments. These became ingrained, part of an internalized framework that could be drawn upon unconsciously when conditions demanded it. The language of the elders was never hurried. Words were chosen for clarity, for rhythm, and for their ability to evoke images and sensations. A description of a particular current was often accompanied by references to familiar landmarks or celestial bodies, enabling the listener to link abstract ideas with concrete experiences. This practice ensured that the knowledge was not just memorized, but felt and understood, accessible even in moments of isolation or stress. Storytelling also reinforced observation skills. Listeners learned to notice subtle differences, to interpret quiet shifts in water, wind, and light. A seemingly minor detail, a change in wave pattern, a fleeting glint on the horizon, the faint scent of land carried by air, could carry essential guidance. In this way, spoken knowledge was intertwined with direct experience, each enhancing the other, creating a holistic understanding of the environment. Through voice, the mariners also preserved the collective wisdom of their communities. Mistakes, discoveries, and innovations were shared, ensuring that the lessons of one generation benefited the next. The oral tradition created a living map, continuously updated and refined, an accumulation of subtle insights gathered over countless journeys. These stories were not mere entertainment. They were vital tools of survival and mastery. Even the quietest, most patient mariner learned that listening was as important as speaking. When at sea, attention to stories of past voyages could guide decisions, influence adjustments, and provide reassurance. The spoken lessons became companions in moments of solitude, as steady and reliable as the stars or the currents themselves. In the absence of written charts, the human voice ensured continuity, offering a thread connecting past, present, and future. As nights unfolded under the familiar stars, with currents carrying the vessel and winds guiding its sails, the mariners recognized the power of accumulated knowledge. It was a subtle, intimate connection, a trust in the guidance of those who had come before, integrated with their own observations. This balance between inherited wisdom and personal experience defined the essence of navigation in a world without instruments. By internalizing this knowledge, sailors developed an extraordinary capacity for attention and recall. They could navigate unseen waters, anticipate shifts in conditions, and make decisions that appeared almost instinctive. Each story passed from voice to ear carried layers of subtle instruction, forming a rich tapestry of understanding that transcended time and place. In this way, knowledge passed by voice became more than information. It was a living framework, a meditation, and a guide. It shaped not only skill, but character, fostering patience, awareness, and respect for the forces of nature. The tradition reinforced the continuity of maritime life, ensuring that even in isolation, each mariner was connected to the wisdom of those who had sailed before and to those who would sail after. As the night deepened, with stars above and the gentle undulation of waves beneath, the sailors' minds carried stories as surely as their hands carried the vessel. Every word recounted, every lesson absorbed, became part of the rhythm of the voyage, guiding, reassuring, and harmonizing with the natural world in a continuous, quiet dialogue that defined both the journey and the way of life itself. While the knowledge carried by voice was indispensable, mariners also developed tools to augment their senses, instruments that translated observation into subtle guidance. These were not the modern gadgets of later centuries, but simple, carefully constructed implements, measuring angles, observing the sun, or gauging the depth and direction of water. The tools were designed to complement understanding, not replace it, working alongside experience, memory, and intuition to navigate the boundless sea. Among the most essential instruments were the early forms of sighting tools, used to measure the height of celestial bodies above the horizon. Even a simple stick with a graduated scale, carefully aligned, could indicate the angle of a star, providing a reference for latitude. The mariners learned to use such tools with patience, combining readings with what their senses and the stories of elders had already taught them. Precision was secondary to consistency. A careful, repeated observation was more valuable than a single measurement. Sounding devices were equally important. By measuring the depth of water, sailors gained knowledge of the seafloor below, which could indicate proximity to shore or hidden obstacles. Simple ropes with weights, marked at intervals, allowed them to feel the contours beneath the waves, translating the invisible into tangible feedback. Every drop, every tug on the line, added information to the mental map of the journey, confirming observations or alerting them to danger. Beyond these implements, small models and markers helped to teach and preserve navigation techniques. Miniature replicas of vessels and rudimentary maps could demonstrate how currents, wind, and tide interacted, allowing mariners to practice maneuvers even when anchored in calm waters. This combination of tactile learning and spoken knowledge ensured that even the most complex lessons could be understood without sight of the wider horizon, building a comprehensive understanding in stages, methodically and patiently. Ropes, knots, and rigging also served as tools of subtle information. How a line strained against the mast, the way a knot held, or the angle at which a sail caught the wind provided immediate, practical insight. Mariners interpreted these tactile cues constantly, adjusting and refining the vessel's position. The ship itself became an extension of perception, each part responding to environmental conditions, each part feeding back knowledge to the attentive sailor. Sails, carefully constructed from woven fibers, were both tools and instruments. The tension, angle, and curvature of canvas could be adjusted to maximize efficiency, harnessing the wind in ways that required both technical skill and intimate understanding. Observation of subtle movements allowed small corrections to compound into significant changes over time, a quiet negotiation with the natural world that demanded patience, sensitivity, and continuous attention. The instruments were not used in isolation. They were integrated with voice, memory, observation, and instinct. Celestial readings were cross-referenced with the feeling of currents, the whisper of wind, and the behavior of waves. Soundings were compared to patterns described by elders. Knots, rigging, and sail adjustments communicated the ongoing dialogue between boat, sea, and sky. Together, these techniques formed a complex system of navigation, both practical and meditative, guiding the mariner through uncertainty with care and assurance. Every tool required familiarity and ritual. Mariners developed routines, measuring the sun's angle at consistent intervals, checking depth at regular points, noting subtle changes in rope tension. These routines became a rhythm, quiet and repetitive, echoing the ongoing pulse of the sea itself. By repeating these tasks, sailors embedded the principles into memory and muscle, allowing for near-automatic adjustments that sustained the journey without conscious strain. The construction of tools was equally precise. Ropes were treated to maintain consistency, wood carefully shaped, scales marked with patience. Every component mattered. A slight misalignment could yield inaccurate readings, which in turn could mislead the journey. Care and attention in preparation mirrored the calm awareness needed in operation. The process of creating and maintaining tools was itself an exercise in mindfulness, reinforcing the focus necessary for successful navigation. Even in the stillness of night, these tools offered guidance. Gentle adjustments could be made based on faint observations, with instruments providing additional clarity when other senses faltered. The interplay of human perception and crafted tools created a dialogue, each enhancing the other. Mariners learned that mastery was not about reliance on any single element, but about integrating them harmoniously. Instrument, observation, story, and intuition in continuous, quiet cooperation. Through this careful integration, the tools became extensions of the mariner's awareness. They provided reassurance when conditions were ambiguous, confirmed hunches derived from voice and memory, and allowed for subtle, precise action. The journey across the open sea was both an exercise in observation and a practice in patience, with instruments serving as both guides and companions, quietly enhancing the mind's capacity to understand and move in harmony with the natural world. In all of this, the mariner learned the delicate balance of action and restraint. Tools offered the possibility of intervention, but wisdom lay in knowing when to act and when to observe. Each adjustment, each measurement, each minor correction was considered carefully, weighed against a broader understanding of currents, wind, and the lessons passed down through voice and experience. This measured approach reinforced calm, focus, and a continuous connection to the rhythms of the environment. The combined practice of using tools, listening to stories, observing natural patterns, and responding patiently created a holistic approach to navigation. Each journey, no matter how long or uncertain, was an opportunity to refine these skills, to deepen understanding, and to harmonize with forces larger than the individual. Through repetition, observation, and mindful interaction with both instruments and nature, mariners moved not with haste, but with deliberate, confident calm. By the night's end, the boat's progress was a testament to integration. Instrument, voice, memory, and observation moving as one. Every adjustment, every careful measurement, and every responsive action contributed to steady navigation, reinforcing the mariner's growing confidence and serenity. Tools and techniques were more than mere implements. They were extensions of human perception, bridges connecting past experience with present observation and future foresight, guiding the journey through both calm and uncertainty. Even in the vast openness of the sea, the world offered subtle markers, landmarks and signs that could guide those attentive enough to notice. These were rarely obvious in the way modern maps would indicate. They were often faint, almost imperceptible cues, visible only to eyes accustomed to careful observation. The coastline might reveal itself as a faint outline against the sky, a change in the color of water, or the sound of distant waves breaking on shoals hidden beneath the surface. The experienced mariner understood that these markers were not mere obstacles or destinations. They were part of a larger narrative, woven into the rhythms of the sea and sky. Navigating by such signs required patience. It was a practice in noticing nuances, the dark silhouette of an island at dawn, the pattern of birds flying overhead, or the distant smoke of a settlement on shore. Each observation had meaning, contributing to a mental map constructed slowly over hours, days, and months. The mariner's gaze learned to move with the subtlety of the environment, scanning continuously without urgency, capturing details that were otherwise invisible. Even small changes in watercolor or wave pattern were crucial. A shallow reef might slightly alter the hue of the surrounding sea, or a shift in current could indicate submerged sandbanks. Experienced sailors trained themselves to detect these subtle variations, interpreting them in the context of the broader patterns learned from voice, memory, and prior experience. Every ripple, every shimmer, every motion was part of an ongoing conversation with the natural world. Birds, too, provided invaluable information. Certain species remained close to land or followed currents that hinted at shoals and banks. Observing their flight patterns allowed sailors to anticipate proximity to coastlines or hidden hazards. Even the calls of birds, faint and carried over long distances, could reveal locations otherwise invisible at night or in mist. These signs, combined with celestial navigation and wind patterns, formed an intricate web of knowledge, linking disparate observations into coherent understanding. Cloud formations, reflections of moonlight on distant clouds, and changes in atmospheric color served as additional markers. Mariners learned to interpret the sky in terms of time, weather, and location. The gentle light of dawn or dusk could reveal shapes on the horizon previously unnoticed, or provide context for currents and wave that had seemed unpredictable moments before. By integrating these signs, sailors navigated with both precision and calm, guided by nature's subtle cues rather than artificial measurements alone. Rock formations and coastal shapes, often silhouetted at night or in the mist, were memorized with care. These features were stored in memory along with details of currents, winds, and tides, forming a rich mental archive. Experienced sailors could identify distant shores before they were fully visible, adjusting course gradually and subtly, in harmony with natural forces. Even minor errors were corrected by careful observation, preventing missteps that could become perilous over time. Seasonal markers also played a role. The timing of bird migrations, the appearance of particular clouds, or the position of the sun and moon at specific times of year provided additional context. Mariners integrated these markers into their ongoing awareness, using them as guides to anticipate currents, avoid hazards, and maintain course over long distances. Knowledge of recurring patterns helped reduce uncertainty, allowing the observer to act with confidence even in unfamiliar waters. Beyond physical features, sounds serve as a marker. The distant murmur of waves against a rocky shore, the subtle echo of surf, or the familiar resonance of water passing over reefs provided auditory cues. These signals, combined with visual observation, reinforced mental maps, providing confirmation or correction. The attentive sailor learned to synchronize multiple senses, building a continuous awareness of position and environment. Finally, these landmarks and signs reinforced the lessons of wind, currents, and storytelling. Each observation connected to a broader framework of experience. A shadow on the horizon could confirm the presence of land previously anticipated by the flight of birds or the smell of salt carried by the breeze. A shift in current could be anticipated through previous knowledge of seasonal winds. The interplay between physical markers and prior wisdom created a holistic understanding, allowing the mariner to navigate confidently even in the absence of precise instruments. The careful observation of these subtle cues required a calm, patient mind. Hasty decisions often led to mistakes, while measured attention rewarded the observer with insight and guidance. Over time, the mariner developed a rhythm, a slow, deliberate scanning of sky, sea, and horizon, integrating each new piece of information into an ongoing mental map. This practice was not merely practical. It became meditative, a quiet alignment with the environment, teaching both skill and serenity in equal measure. By the end of the journey, every landmark, every subtle change, every whisper of sound and movement had contributed to the sailor's understanding of place and path. The mind became finely attuned, capable of anticipating unseen hazards and finding direction amidst apparent chaos. Landmarks and signs were thus more than guides. They were teachers, offering continuous instruction to those who could observe with patience and respect, reinforcing the enduring connection between human and natural world. Night at sea brought a distinct kind of awareness, one shaped by shadow and subtle light, by the quiet hum of water and wind. When the sun had dipped below the horizon, the mariner's senses shifted, relying less on the bold visuals of day and more on delicate cues that could only be discerned in darkness. The stars, now fully visible, became steadfast companions, their positions marking familiar paths. Yet the night required a patient mind to decode the faintest signs of direction and change. The mariner learned to perceive with care, noticing the gentle movement of waves beneath the hull, the distant flicker of bioluminescence, and the faint outlines of clouds against the inky sky. Every element carried meaning. A subtle shift in wind might suggest approaching weather or a nearby landmass, while the pattern of waves hinted at currents that could alter the ship's course. In the absence of daylight, every observation was amplified, requiring a slow, deliberate focus that demanded both concentration and calm. Listening became as vital as seeing. The gentle lapping of water against the bow, the rhythmic sway of the sails, even the distant calls of nocturnal birds or animals provided essential information. Sound traveled differently at night, carrying clues about distance, direction, and environmental conditions. Experienced sailors integrated these auditory signals with prior knowledge, interpreting them as guides for adjustment, navigation, and anticipation. The interplay of sound and observation heightened awareness, transforming the night into a landscape rich with subtle instruction. Celestial navigation reached its most profound form during these hours. With the sky clear, stars formed a steady, silent map. Mariners traced imaginary lines between constellations, noting angles and alignments, integrating these patterns with the memory of landmarks, currents, and seasonal variations. The constellations became companions, quietly offering guidance while the mariner moved in harmony with water, wind, and vessel. Each glance skyward was an act of reassurance, linking past journeys with present perception. Nighttime also revealed changes invisible during the day. Currents shifted in subtle ways under the influence of moonlight and tide, reflected in the gentle movement of floating objects or the faint shimmering of the water surface. Mariners observed these shifts patiently, making micro-adjustments to course, sails, and positioning. Each adjustment was deliberate, grounded in a deep understanding that the night amplified both risk and opportunity. Mistakes could be costly, but cautious observation transformed uncertainty into manageable information. The practice of nighttime observation was meditative. Time seemed to slow as sailors attuned themselves to the rhythms of the sea and sky. Every movement of the vessel, every whisper of wind, every glimmer of starlight became part of a continuous narrative that the attentive mind absorbed. This quiet, immersive awareness fostered a state of calm vigilance, where the mariner moved in concert with the environment rather than against it, responding with patience and subtlety. Reflections on the water offered additional markers. The moonlight glinting on gentle waves revealed hidden patterns in the currents, while distant reflections could suggest the presence of land or shoals. Even subtle color shifts in the darkened water conveyed information, building a mental map refined by observation and experience. Every visual detail became a thread in the intricate tapestry of navigation, connecting known markers with immediate environmental feedback. Nighttime observations also strengthened the mariner's connection to learned stories. The voice of an elder, the memory of prior voyages, and the experience of countless journeys coalesced into a framework for understanding. The silent movements of the ocean, interpreted through this framework, provided reassurance and guidance. The mind became a canvas, integrating memory, observation, and instinct into a seamless process, each moment of attentiveness reinforcing both skill and serenity. Patience was central to mastery. Rushing through the darkness often led to oversight, misinterpretation, and error. The attentive mariner, however, learned to move slowly, to measure every shift in wind, current, or light, and to trust in accumulated knowledge. Each night at sea was both a lesson and a rehearsal, where repeated attention refined skill and reinforced the mental and emotional equanimity required to navigate effectively. Ultimately, nighttime observations taught that mastery depended not on control but on harmony. By observing, listening, and adjusting with calm precision, mariners could move through unknown waters with quiet confidence. The night, with all its subtle signals and gentle mysteries, became a teacher, a constant, silent guide, offering insights to those willing to move slowly, observe attentively, and trust both experience and instinct. Through these hours of quiet reflection, sailors cultivated an intimate understanding of the ocean's rhythms. Nighttime observation was not merely about reaching a destination. It was about aligning the mind, body, and vessel with the ongoing patterns of the natural world. In darkness, the senses expanded, patience deepened, and the mariner's awareness reached its most refined state, preparing both for immediate action and for the lessons that the next journey would inevitably bring. Mastery at sea was not a matter of conquering the waters, but of becoming attuned to them. The unknown was ever present. The uncharted currents, sudden squalls, and hidden shoals. But through patient observation, careful use of tools, and attention to subtle markers, mariners transformed uncertainty into a living map of understanding. Each journey, whether brief or extended, contributed to an ever-deepening comprehension of the vast, unpredictable world around them. The culmination of all prior skills, the voice, stories, memory, tools, landmarks, and nighttime observations, was the ability to navigate with both confidence and humility. Mariners did not impose their will on the ocean. They listened, adapted, and responded, allowing intuition and knowledge to guide action. Even the most experienced could never predict everything. Yet through calm attentiveness, the unknown became navigable, familiar in its patterns and rhythms. Experience revealed that mastery was a layered understanding. Physical skill, mental mapping, and perceptual sensitivity combined with patience and respect. The mariner's mind became a repository of patterns, both learned and observed, while the body executed maneuvers with quiet precision. Every sail adjustment, every course correction, every shift in weight or rope tension was an expression of this integrated understanding, a dialogue between human and sea, past and present, known and unknown. The unknown also required imagination. Mariners visualized potential changes in weather, anticipated shifts in currents, and mentally projected the positions of stars, landmarks, and islands. These mental exercises were not mere speculation. They were informed by accumulated observation, stories, and experience. By anticipating what could emerge from the sea's hidden depths, sailors prepared themselves for action, responding to challenges with foresight rather than panic. The unknown was, in a sense, rehearsed before it arrived, approached not as threat, but as a natural rhythm to engage with patiently. In this state, mariners cultivated a sense of calm control. Action was measured, deliberate, and informed. Tools were used judiciously. Observations were interpreted with care, and decisions were made without haste. Mistakes were learning opportunities, reinforcing the mind's capacity to integrate new information and refine mental models. Each journey through uncertainty strengthened the sailor's understanding, patience, and resilience. Even small observations could inform mastery. The faintest glimmer on the horizon, a subtle shift in wind, or the direction of a current could suggest hidden hazards or opportunities. Attentiveness to these signals allowed the mariner to maintain course, preserving safety and ensuring progress. Mastery was, therefore, not the absence of the unknown, but the ability to move gracefully within it, guided by skill, perception, and experience. The integration of knowledge, observation, and patience also fostered a deeper connection to the environment. The sea became a teacher rather than a challenge, offering subtle cues and continuous feedback. Mariners learned that every unknown had a rhythm and pattern, and that by observing carefully and responding thoughtfully, even the most unfamiliar waters could be understood. Mastery was not dominance. It was communion with the world and its complexity and beauty. Through repeated practice, the mariner internalized patterns, recognizing the interplay of wind, waves, stars, and landmarks. Even when navigating unfamiliar regions, the mind could draw upon known principles, extrapolating likely scenarios and guiding decisions accordingly. This allowed for both safety and exploration, enabling journeys that were both confident and calm, adventurous yet measured. By night or day, through calm waters or storm, the process of mastering the unknown reinforced focus, patience, and equanimity. Each journey was an exercise in awareness, a practice in observation and integration, a meditation on the interplay between human skill and natural forces. Mariners emerged from each voyage with knowledge that was not just practical, but experiential, emotional, and profoundly connected to the rhythms of the world. Ultimately, mastery of the unknown was a continual process, never complete, but constantly refined. Each observation, adjustment, and lesson added depth to understanding, shaping the mariner into a figure capable of moving gracefully within uncertainty. The unknown remained ever present, yet no longer threatening. It became a domain in which patience, skill, and observation could transform mystery into comprehension. The mariner's journey, then, was as much inward as outward, a study of the sea, the self, and the subtle threads that link them in quiet harmony. In the end, the sea taught that mastery is not about certainty, but about trust. Trust in one's own skills, trust in accumulated wisdom, and trust in the subtle guidance offered by nature itself. With each passing night, each measured observation, and each careful adjustment, the mariner learned to navigate the unknown not with fear, but with attentive calm. And in that calm, the unknown became a quiet companion, guiding the journey and offering the gentle reassurance that, even in vastness and uncertainty, one can move forward with confidence and grace. You don't need to keep listening anymore. The story can fade into the background now, becoming softer with every moment. If you're still awake, that's perfectly fine. There's no rush and nothing you need to remember. Just let your breathing slow down, let your thoughts drift where they want to go, and allow the quiet of this night to settle around you. This story will remain here, gently playing while you rest. Tomorrow night, a new night will be waiting for you, and it's one you won't want to miss. And if sleep hasn't arrived just yet, you can quietly return to one of the previous nights and let those stories guide you instead. For now, sleep well.